The 21-year-old Anita Wooldridge had just completed her college degree. After college, she sought her way into adult life. She went to work and spent weekends with friends. She worked in a church and enjoyed helping people. When her best friend got married, Anita was one of the bridesmaids. The friends actively prepared for the celebration. They chose outfits and sent out invitations. Anita was happy then. Her life seemed beautiful. On June 25, 1998, it was very hot and sunny. It was an ordinary day in Anita Wooldridge's life. She had planned to have lunch with her boyfriend at her grandparents' before her afternoon shift at the shipping company. At that time, she did not yet suspect that she would soon be confronted with an evil that would change her life forever. At around 12:30 p.m., Anita's mother came home. She was very surprised to see her daughter's boyfriend standing in front of the house. The boyfriend said he had intended to pick up Anita at 11:45 a.m. for lunch, but she had not been at home. He then assumed she had gone shopping and would return shortly, so he decided to wait for her. The woman's gaze fell on the garage door. It was open and her daughter's car was not inside. As she approached the front door, she noticed it was unlocked. When she went inside, she saw several bloodstains on the floor. The mother realized that her daughter had not left without informing her family. Fearing for her daughter's life, she called the police. Officers arrived at the Wooldridge family home and were immediately alarmed by the traces they found. There were what appeared to be blood traces in the house, and it seemed possible that an attack had taken place. From that moment on, the investigation into Anita's disappearance began. Her blue limousine was reported missing. Medico-legal examiners took blood samples for analysis and also lifted fingerprints from all objects in the house. The worried parents described their daughter as a responsible person with a steady job. She had no problems that would have led her to leave the house without explanation. Investigators questioned Anita's boyfriend, with whom she had been involved for the past months. According to him, he drove to Anita's house around 11:45 a.m. and waited there until her mother returned. Before going to her house, he had been with friends. After speaking with investigators, the boyfriend had a 90-minute window in which his alibi could not be confirmed. He agreed to come in for further questioning if needed. Crime scene technicians examined the missing woman's bedroom. Her work clothes were still there. Anita's mother reported that shortly before the police arrived, she had spoken with her daughter's supervisor, who said Anita had not shown up for work. During the investigation, the officers called Anita's workplace again to ask if she had appeared for her shift, but the answer was the same: Anita did not come in. The employer said he was very surprised by this behavior, which did not fit Anita at all. She was a very reliable and responsible employee who always showed up for her shift, even if she wasn't feeling well. While the experts examined her belongings, the mother noticed that the red bathrobe she had bought her the day before was missing. On a shelf in the bathroom lay her glasses and contact lenses. Due to her poor vision, Anita would not have been able to drive without them. But the car was gone too. The bed had been stripped and the sheets were not creased. Investigators suspected they might find physiological traces on the bedding. So forensic technicians examined the linens under an ultraviolet lamp, but the bedding was clean. In the garage, the investigators found a bundle of adhesive tape with strands of hair attached that closely resembled Anita's. The police suspected the tape had been wrapped around her head to gag her. If so, this would suggest that Anita was still alive when she was abducted. Officers with tracking dogs searched all surrounding areas, but to no avail. After searching the house, investigators set out to find possible witnesses. A neighbor living across from the Wooldridges recalled seeing someone in front of their house that morning around 10:30 a.m., a man with a blue backpack walking toward the front door, though he could not make out the man's face. At that point, police could only speculate what had happened. The worst fear was that she might have been abducted. From Anita Wooldridge's memory, on the morning of June 25, I was on my way to my grandparents for lunch. At about 10 o'clock, someone rang the doorbell. I wanted to open it, but I stepped on something on the floor, hobbled forward, and reached the door. I recognized the visitor. He asked for a glass of water. I knew he often rode his bicycle and that it was very hot that day. Our conversation was interrupted by a phone call. I invited him inside and went to answer the call. After the call, as I pulled the knob out, blood dripped from it. I turned, grabbed some tissues, and wanted to wipe the blood when suddenly I felt an electric shock. My legs wouldn't obey me. I was surprised and didn't immediately understand what had happened. After a few minutes, I realized I was under attack. I tried to fight back, but he was much bigger and armed. I was still dazed and could not believe this was happening to me. With gritted teeth, he told me to calm down and showed me a loaded pistol. He said he had come to rob me. I told him where the money was kept in our house and where my car keys were. I wanted him to leave, but he said no. He would drop me off somewhere outside the city so I couldn't call the police. Before withdrawing money from my cards, he dressed in women's clothing so that if anyone saw us, they would think I was being abducted by a woman. Then he closed the garage door and locked me in the trunk of my car. In that moment, fear gripped my entire body. It was about 40 degrees outside, and suddenly I realized this was really happening. I didn't know what he intended or how I would get out or attract attention. From fear, I didn't notice that we had only driven for a few minutes, which meant we hadn't left the city. Then I heard the rustling of gravel in the driveway, the closing of the garage door, and then nothing, only silence. I thought he had left me to die, but while I was still thinking that, he opened the trunk. I asked him to free my hands. They hurt badly from the cable ties and they were swollen and red. In that moment, I thought I would lose my arms. As I begged him to release my hands, he suddenly asked, "Do you know why I took you?" I answered, "To rob me." He replied sharply, "No. I have another purpose. I have needs." I always thought it was better to die than to commit violence, but I had no choice. He was armed. At that moment, I tried to imagine a place where I was happy and to think of something other than what he was doing. What began as a robbery quickly became my worst nightmare. He led me upstairs and said he would lock me in this closet. I knew it was God's will, but if I'd had the choice, I wouldn't have wanted to die like that. The next day, investigators spoke with a man who claimed to have phoned Anita on the morning she disappeared, a friend of Anita's father. Telephone records confirmed the call. The man said he had called around 10:30 a.m. and asked to speak with her father. Anita answered and said her father wasn't home. Before she could leave a message, someone knocked on the door. She returned to the phone, left the message, but did not say who had come. After this call, it became clear to investigators that Anita had probably been abducted. Officers suspected the kidnapper might contact the family to demand ransom. That same day, technicians installed listening devices on the missing woman's apartment phone to prepare for such a call. Simultaneously, investigators began to look for anyone who might have had a motive to harm Anita. They checked everyone who had contact with the missing woman. Investigators spoke with Anita's colleagues at the shipping company and they recalled something. A few weeks before her disappearance, Anita and her co-workers had gone to a bar to relax. One employee had been quite drunk and started to pay obsessive attention to her. It was obvious she felt uncomfortable, but Anita politely rejected him. After being rebuffed, he became upset and very dissatisfied. Troublingly, this man did not show up for work on the day Anita vanished. Investigators went immediately to his home to speak with him. During questioning, the man claimed his encounter with Anita at the bar had been a harmless exchange of courtesies, that they were merely friends and co-workers. He said that on the morning she disappeared, he came to work before his shift and told his boss he needed the day off to work on his car. The supervisor confirmed his alibi. While the police investigated, family and friends of the missing woman distributed flyers in the neighborhood and contacted local media to publicize Anita's disappearance. Volunteer civil defense groups and residents began searching for her, but the search remained fruitless. From Anita Wooldridge's memory, June 26, 1998, 4 a.m., I prayed and hummed softly to calm myself. He left briefly, then pulled me into his pickup and drove out of town on country roads. When I'm nervous, I often need the bathroom. I told him so. He became angry, afraid I might be noticed. He stood beside me as I urinated at the roadside. He said he would kill me if I tried to run or call for help. All the time I prayed, Lord, please let there be a police station or an overturned tree and an officer nearby. All these thoughts raced through my mind, but nothing happened. 48 hours after Anita's disappearance, investigators finally received a promising new lead from the mother of one of her friends. The woman reported that Anita had problems with another shipping company employee. She said the man had harassed her at work. Anita was afraid and did not dare file a complaint. She feared ending up in a dumpster. With these disturbing details, investigators hoped to find Anita before it was too late, because with every passing hour, the chance of finding her alive diminished. When investigators returned to the shipping company, the supervisor informed them that the man had resigned 3 weeks before her disappearance and moved to another state. A background check showed he could not have been involved in Anita's disappearance. Anita's boyfriend was asked to take a lie detector test because his alibi for the morning she disappeared could not be fully confirmed. The test consisted of 2 questions: whether he had anything to do with Anita's disappearance and whether he knew where she could be found. He answered both with no. He did not pass the test, but the police had no evidence against him and he was released. After 2 days of searching, investigators were still no closer to finding the missing woman, and the likelihood that she was still alive decreased day by day. In hopes of uncovering new leads, investigators spoke with Anita's former co-workers at the sports center where she had worked 2 years earlier. A colleague remembered a man at the gym who behaved rudely toward women. The man's name was Victor Thomas Steele. Steele was rude to Anita, but she remained polite and tried hard to engage him in conversation. His behavior did not change, and eventually he was banned from the gym. Anita's former co-worker said Victor Steele lived in the same town. Investigators checked Steele's background and discovered that he had been convicted of kidnapping in 1984. They did not know whether Steele had had contact with Anita in those 2 years, but at that point he was the most promising suspect. To strengthen their theory, an investigator consulted a former FBI profiler who advised him. The profiler identified 4 persons of interest and stressed that time and resources were limited, and of course time was the most important of all. The profiler reviewed the crime scene reports and each suspect's background. The personality of 41-year-old Victor Thomas Steele stood out. The circumstances of Steele's 1984 conviction were very relevant to Anita's disappearance. In December 1984, Steele had stalked a woman at Indiana University where he was a student. One evening, he went to her house and waited for her boyfriend to leave. Knowing she was alone, he knocked on the door. When she opened it, he forced his way in and then pulled a knife from a blue backpack. He forced her to go with him and ordered her to pretend they were lovers. Eventually, he decided to let her go on the condition that she would not call the police, but as soon as she was free, she ran to the nearest phone and called the police. He spent years behind bars and was distraught over his conviction. Like Anita, this young woman had rejected his advances. Steele had stayed in touch with her and lived nearby. As in the first case, he had his blue backpack with him containing tape, ropes, and everything else he intended to use. It was important to him to feel like her boyfriend. He hoped to make this woman love him, and apparently 15 years later, he could still try what he had failed at the first time. If he had kidnapped Anita, he would not make the same mistake twice. The profiler emphasized how important it was that Steele not learn about the investigation. If he suspected the police were after him, he would probably not keep Anita alive. From Anita Wooldridge's memory, June 27, 1998. 1 a.m., I was too afraid to look at him and tried the whole time to look out the window just so I wouldn't see him. I remember him telling me, "You could forget about your family and love me." With these words he meant, "Do as I say and maybe I'll let you live." At the toll booth, he stopped for the cashier. I sat beside him, knowing he had a gun and more knives. I wondered how many times he could kill me before we reached the booth. So I kept thinking about running away. Hours later, we reached his secret hideout. He told me the house was in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't run anywhere. It was horrible. He kept saying he would kill me if I didn't obey, and then he raped me. Then he dragged me into a room with 3 or maybe 5 metal cabinets and said, "I will lock you in here," threatening to kill me if I tried to escape. So I never knew whether he was nearby or not. Perhaps he made noise intentionally so I'd believe others were in the house. If I had called for help, he would have killed me. I remember that in the closet, I could hardly breathe. I knew he was sleeping next to me because I could hear him snoring. Eventually, I had no strength left and fell asleep. 2.5 days after Anita's disappearance, police monitored the last known location of the main suspect, Victor Steele. It was his mother's house on the outskirts of town. They needed a way to determine who was inside without revealing themselves. Then investigators noticed a car parked outside the house with a "for sale" sign. Undercover officers posed as potential buyers and knocked on the door. At that moment, they did not know whether Steele or Anita was inside. But with every moment of delay, it became less likely that Anita was still alive. The door was opened by an older woman who told the undercover agents that the car for sale belonged to her son Victor. The investigators said they were ready to buy it immediately and were invited inside to discuss price and the car's history. Steele's mother reported that her son had moved to Wisconsin a few weeks earlier and still had no telephone connection there, so she had no way to contact him. She would have to speak with him before setting a price. The investigators promised to stay in touch and looked forward to meeting him. At that point, they had to leave because they could not search the house alone without permission or a search warrant. Investigators thought it unlikely she was involved, but they weren't sure whether she might warn her son before a search. In the meantime, an FBI profiler remained convinced that Steele was the prime suspect. He suspected Steele had taken Anita to a secure location where he could spend a lot of time with her, a completely different place where no one knew him and where no one would think to look. It was likely he had prepared the place in advance, then returned to take Anita. From Anita Wooldridge's memory, June 28, 1998. It was the very first day he pulled me out of the closet. So I was very excited and began to cry. The clinking of his belt as he pulled down his pants is forever etched in my memory. I knew I had to gain his trust to survive. If he believed I was in love with him, he would let me leave the house alone and I could get help. I had to get out. I had a loving family and friends waiting for me. This gave me hope. I played along with his fantasies to buy time. It was my only chance of rescue. On June 29, police began gathering information about Victor Steele. They learned he was unemployed and owned a red pickup. Steele's credit card statements showed that a few days before Anita disappeared, he had rented a truck in Indiana. According to the rental company's records, Steele drove 910 miles round trip. Investigators divided this distance in half and found that the city on this route was La Crosse, Wisconsin. The credit card statements also showed he bought fuel in that city on the day he rented the truck. Investigators informed the FBI that Victor Steele had likely crossed state lines with a captive woman. From Anita Wooldridge's memory, he let me out of the closet and had me watch videotapes. He fed me, but I hardly ate. I had no appetite. Steele used every opportunity to enact his fantasies, and whenever he thought I looked calm, he would say, "I'll kill you any moment," just to make sure I was still afraid. 7 days after the 21-year-old Anita Wooldridge disappeared, her blue limousine was found near her house on a suburban street a few miles from Steele's mother's home. The car was unlocked and the keys were still in the ignition. Arriving investigators feared Anita's body might be hidden in the trunk, but fortunately it was not. During the search, they found cuts in the cable ties, which could have been made to help her exit the car. There was a realistic chance she was still alive when she was pulled from the trunk. Investigators found no semen, blood, or other signs of a struggle in the car. At the end of June, investigators decided to travel from Indiana to La Crosse, Wisconsin to look for Steele. In that city, Steele had purchased fuel. With no address or even a general location, their search was fruitless. A week had passed since Anita's disappearance. Searchers still clung to the hope she was alive. Meanwhile, investigators decided to revisit Steele's last known location, his mother's house. Again, they posed as interested buyers of the used car. This time, they hoped to learn Steele's whereabouts from his mother, and they were finally successful. She said she had no phone number for her son but did have an address. The officers immediately passed this information to the FBI office in La Crosse. From Anita Wooldridge's memory, as routine, "He let me out of the wardrobe, I went downstairs to the bathroom, came back up, and then he raped me. Oh, and we also played board games as if we were a normal couple. I had to obey to survive. Around the third or fourth day, I lost track of the dates and was completely disoriented. My specialty is programming, and he asked me to fix his computer. As I worked, I told him the time and date settings on his computer were wrong. Every day he would ask me the date and time, and I would enter them, so I always knew what time it was. One day, while I lay in the closet, I suddenly heard strange noises. Everything is clear here, and a very loud sound like a police siren. He said he would kill me if I screamed, but I prayed, God, let it be the police. But he was only playing with me." On July 2, investigators learned where Victor Steele might be. Together with FBI agents, they arrived there minutes later. They immediately saw Steele's red pickup parked outside. After monitoring Steele's vehicle and its location, police went to the local court to obtain a search warrant. While waiting, they contacted the property owner nearby to find out if Steele had actually rented the building. The landlord confirmed the tenant was Victor Steele. According to the landlord, Steele told him he wanted to turn the building into a bookstore. The landlord gave the FBI a sketch of the interior layout and handed over a key to the front door. Investigators feared the house might be booby-trapped, so they proceeded with extreme caution. After entering, officers loudly announced their presence, but there was no response. In the last room, they noticed a large metal cabinet lying on the floor with its top facing upward. Its doors were secured with a broken broomstick and a butter knife. In that moment, officers feared it was a coffin holding Anita's body. They approached the cabinet and began to listen, but there was only absolute silence. After carefully manipulating the cabinet's latches, they opened the door and realized the search was over. Anita Wooldridge had been found alive days into her abduction. Anita Wooldridge had been held by Victor Steele for days. She was not desperate. Despite the physical and psychological torture and being confined in a metal cabinet, she fought for her life. In Steele's mother's apartment, police discovered several disturbing items: a notebook containing addresses, travel plans, workplaces, and descriptions of various women. It seemed unlikely he would have chosen another victim if Anita had not survived. On July 3, Anita returned home. On her way back, residents greeted her with posters of support. The next day, July 4, her best friend's wedding took place, and despite all odds, she decided to attend. Victor Steele had taken 8 days of her life and would take no more. Steele refused a lawyer and insisted on defending himself at trial. The trial took place in January 1999, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Anita's steadfastness and refusal to give up during those 8 terrible days so shocked the FBI that the case was incorporated into the training program for future agents. Today, Anita Wooldridge works as a paramedic and helps people who have also survived abductions. Anita says it gives her relief to talk about it. She hopes none of it was in vain, and that if her story helps even one person, it will have been worth it. She finds it harder now to trust people and believes she may never marry, but she tries not to think about it and wants to believe there is someone out there who can understand and accept that she needs a little more time than everyone else. Anita overcame this ordeal thanks to her strong personality and her faith. She hopes to become an FBI agent so she can help others as she was helped. Thank you for watching and take care.